Behold, my glorious supporter Quartermaster Sea has asked me to make some Gauss augments. For each of Gauss's abilities, what do you think are likely augment mods we'd get? If applicable, are there any abilities you think shouldn't get an augment at all? Well, you got some tricky wording in there. So, what do you think are likely augments that we'd get? In other words, not necessarily augments that I want, but augments that you think we might actually get in the game. I thought about that for a little bit, and I decided that I don't know. So I'm going to tell you augments that I think they should put in the game. And not for nothing, I want to note that it tends to be the case that they put things in the game that players have suggested, or they ask for feedback about a lot of them. So I don't think it's unreasonable for me to cut corners and say that, but to be honest with you, I'm often pretty puzzled by the augments they put in the game. I have no idea. What augments would they actually put in the game? I'm not sure. However, as I tell you my own ideas, I did pay extra special attention to the design intent of the ability. And you'll see that a few times. I'll explain it as we go. So these are abilities that I think were augments that we're likely to get in the sense that they respond to the design intention of the ability it's augmenting. So I'll explain. My first one is a good example. So Mach Rush. So my augment for Mach Rush is when you hit something, you create a field, like an AoE, and if you're in that AoE and you Mach Rush again, you get more speed. It doesn't build up forever, but in other words, there's two speeds for Mach Rush now, one base one, and then with the augment, you can go faster if you go out of a field. What is this for? Why? The interesting thing about Mach Rush as a mobility ability is that obviously the main fantasy is running across water. It's just fun. It's a fun idea to run through open worlds. That's fun. Gauss is the frame that feels fast, not that really is fast. And Mach Rush has a sort of a base speed, and then it's not modded by strength. It's affected by sprint speed, but anyway. And so one of the other intentions with Mach Rush is that fun design idea, what if there's a frame that just books it, has an ability that they just run? One of the design ideas that made that ability actually work is that, well, okay, but Warframe is often played in corridors. It's not often played literally on an open field. There are open worlds, but a lot of the missions have a lot of walls, a lot of turns. How can we make Mach Rush make sense as an ability in these contexts? Well, we make it do something good when you slam into a wall. However, I would argue Mach Rush does not currently do something good enough that you care about it when you slam into a wall. So my augment is trying to fix that in some way. That's the intention. My specific idea was simply to make you go faster. In other words, if you want to, what if we can make it so you can go fast in the middle of a mission? When you hit a wall and you get interrupted and you can't go as fast, you gain the ability to go faster. So ping-ponging from wall to wall to wall it kind of speeds you up a little bit. And so it's okay that you're inevitably going to hit something, right? That was my intention. You could have it do damage in some way. I don't know. I sort of think that's kind of a mistake. I feel like people like going fast with Mach Rush. It can be valuable, and it does CC enemies. Like, a lot of the time you do want to plow through enemies in missions, and Mach Rush is good at that. It'd be better at that if there were these speed AoEs. Just to be clear, my intention is that you go a lot faster when you have the augment and you rush inside of one of those fields. So you hit a wall, you make a speed field, and then if you rush out of it, you go a lot faster and probably hit another wall again, and you kind of chain that. So it's like a ping-pong augment. I hope that makes sense. Or pinball. Ping pong. It's not like ping pong. It's like pinball. Anyway, it's ping pong. Moving right along. I hope it makes sense, just as an aside, how I was saying I'm trying to respond to the design intention of the ability. I'm not just picking some random Gauss augment I would like. I'm trying to make the ability's design intentions work better, or at all in this case. So that's going to be the case for the other ones. You also asked if there are any abilities I think shouldn't get an augment at all. So I'll briefly mention Redline here. I don't think Redline needs an augment. I think there's plenty going on already on Redline, and I sort of don't love the idea that every ability has an augment. I think by their very nature, some abilities don't make a lot of sense with augments. A lot of Warframe kits are designed in such a way where one ability or even two of the abilities are kind of a combo or like a cog in the build, which I don't think is bad design per se. A really good example is Ember's Fire Blast. It's mostly used as a tool to dump heat from immolation to manage that heat gauge, which is a mechanic for her other parts of her kit, right? That's cool. I think that's fine. Now, I do think that that type of ability is potentially interesting to augment. Don't get me wrong, but I think that there are some kinds of those abilities, like Redline, where it's not like a cog for the rest of the kit, but it's kind of like the way station by which the rest of the kit functions. Redline is your mechanic, and this ability sort of supercharges it and gets you a bonus from it. It's kind of a passive ability, maybe in the best way possible. But I already think Redline is a little weird because there's kind of no disadvantage to using it, I don't feel. So I don't know. There's plenty going on there already. Personally, I think Redline's fine the way it is, or maybe the better way to put it is the changes I would make to it, if any, would be changes to the base ability, and they would probably be nerfs. So I don't necessarily think that we should give it an augment. On the other hand of the spectrum, Thermal Sunder. Another thing that I would like to see them do with augments, that a lot of players want them to do with augments, that they tend to respond to when players want them to do, is the ability to put multiple augments for the same ability on that ability at the same time. This first became relevant when we got the Conclave to PvE augments. There were a bunch of Warframe ability augments that only worked in Conclave. We got a lot of them ported over to PvE, which is really cool. The problem is a lot of them would be mostly relevant if you could use them alongside an existing augment for that ability, but you can't. And in many cases, there's no reason why not. Like, they don't conflict in any way. It wouldn't even be, like, overpowered or anything. You just, for some reason, you just can't. That is silly, and it should not be the case, and I'm sure eventually it will not be the case, but at the moment it is. My recommendation for Thermal Sunder is that it gets two augments, an augment for the cold mode and an augment for the heat mode. And then you can put on both of them if you want. Maybe they have a combo when you put on both. That would really add some customization and expressiveness to Gauss's playstyles that he doesn't really have at the moment. What should they do? Well, I don't know. I thought about that for a while. Gauss's cold and heat thermal sunders are already... The cold one builds battery, is the main thing, and it's a good AoE slow. And then the heat one removes some armor because heat. And then if you combine them, it does pretty nice damage. I was thinking maybe the cold one could get a bigger range, and something like maybe you can get a sprint speed boost for every enemy whose kinetic energy you siphon from them. Another speed boost for Gauss would also be cool, because a lot of people want to play Gauss as a speed frame. He's meant to be like feeling fast and always feel fast, even if you don't build for speed, as opposed to Volt, who doesn't feel fast unless you specifically build for speed. But that doesn't mean that we can't make Gauss able to be even faster. That's fine. So my cold augment is going to be, sure, the radius is increased, so a range increase. We get stats on augments sometimes. And that seems to resonate well with people. Mag's Magnetize Augment is an example. It just gives you a flat amount of range, and then it has some other effects. People seem to get that augments are a fair trade-off when you do that, so why not? And then every enemy that you hit with the increased range, you get a sprint speed boost that, caps at like 15 enemies or so. Or it doesn't cap. Why the hell not? Don't cap it. And then the heat one. Oh, I don't know. I don't find the heat one particularly useful. I guess, so it's removing armor. Could it sort of further destroy defenses or give enemies a damage vulnerability? Could be like a molecular prime effect. That might be a little powerful. That doesn't sound like a bad idea, though. Yeah, it can make them take more damage. The main thing about this, I hope I'm not sounding dismissive of these potentially interesting ideas, is to give Thermal Sunder some customizability. Do you want to build into the cold one or the heat one or both? What should they have as they should totally have a combo if you run both. Also, if you've played Risk of Rain 2, one of the reasons I thought of this is there are these two items, Rulin's Band and Jaro's Band, that are ice and fire. So when you do a certain set high amount of damage, one of them triggers a fire tornado that does lots of damage, and one of them triggers an ice burst. And if you have both of them, they always trigger together, and then they go and cool down together, which is cool. So you can really plan around, my burst skill gets even more burst added to it, but on a cooldown that may be longer than the ability's cooldown, which is fun. So maybe something like that. Can we do that somehow? Maybe if you have both augments on and you use the cold and heat thing combined, you double the effect. It just happens twice or something. That's very similar to the band thing. That might be a little overpowered. Yeah, I don't know. That's hard. I'm not sure. What do you all think? I'm really not sure about that one, but that's the intention. I think that would be fun. Finally, kinetic plating. This one is complicated. I went back and forth on this for a while. I actually tanked on this parlay for a full day. I try not to do this, but sometimes I really want to figure out how to express an idea, and I end up not making the video for like a day or two longer. It was busy this week, but I try not to do that, so I'm sorry for the delay. But I wanted to figure this out, and I realized I'm not necessarily going to figure out the perfect way to do this mechanic, so let me explain what I want to do. Kinetic plating is a damage reduction ability. And how it works, if you're not familiar, is you activate it, it's got an energy cost, and then it's got a duration. For that duration, you lose a little bit of battery passively, and you gain damage reduction. You don't take as much damage from physical damage types and such. Kinetic damage types, including like cold and heat or whatever. Blast. Anyway, you get it. You take less damage from most sources. Most enemies do physical damage. And if you take a lot of damage, it drains the battery. Now, if you do damage or move, there's something that gives you a little more battery. But basically, while it's active, you take less damage, but the battery goes down in general. What I wanted to do was create a sort of a fix for this timer simulator type of ability. These are abilities where you pretty much just set and forget them. You turn them on. A red line is this kind of ability. You turn them on and they're just kind of there. And you want to keep them active all the time, but they require minimal upkeep and they don't really have any interaction. They just make you more powerful. So I think the way to make kinetic plating a stronger ability and a more interactive ability, not that it's not good, Gauss is fine, is to play into shields. Gauss has a lot of passive shield regeneration stuff. I think the idea is supposed to be that Gauss is really quick at getting in and out of combat, and so regenerating shields becomes a much more reasonable prospect. But shields are still kind of meh, and you don't have a huge motivation to build for shields because of the overshield cap. Gauss is not exactly an expert at generating his own overshields, but it's still a thing you can do. You can bring a weapon or some source of overshields, and then instead of building redirection, you can just get overshields. So what if we make an ability where you get damage reduction, which is good for shields because they don't have armor damage reduction, and you get shields somehow, but not at the same time. You have to micro the ability. So here's my idea. You could reactivate kinetic plating to turn it off while it's active. And if you do that, you gain shields based on something. Maybe based on the battery, like how much the battery is charged. The idea being if you get shot a lot, then kinetic plating will charge down. And then if you reactivate it to get shields, you won't get very much. On the other hand, if you activate it and then reactivate it, you get a lot of shields, but you just turned off your damage reduction. So then you could just turn it back on, but you get the idea. Maybe reactivating it also drains some battery, but then it gives you that percentage of shields or something. You can see how exactly how you'd want to implement that mechanic is a little confusing, but that's the idea, is to make it so kinetic plating can also give you shields. So it's a pretty powerful damage reduction suite. You can get EHP from getting raw shields or from damage reduction. So great, you could get both, but not immediately at the same time, not with one button pressed at the same time. So you have to interact with the ability a bit more. Now, it occurs to me that if your battery is high, it's not very interesting to simply activate, reactivate, get a bunch of shields, and then activate it again to get damage reduction on those shields. That's kind of boring, which is the problem that I ran into when I was thinking about this one. But I do think that general concept is interesting. I'm just not sure how you would do it. Maybe the ability goes on cooldown, like the damage reduction goes on cooldown. You can't reactivate it after reactivating it for like some amount of time. That could be a thing. Yeah, that's a decent solution. Okay, that was not so bad. This is why you shouldn't tank on things for so long. Sometimes your first idea won't be your best idea, but your last one probably won't be either. Eventually you just got to give it a try. So nice. That's what I think. I really like Gauss. I feel like Gauss would fit really well as this kind of skirmisher warframe, and I feel like he currently doesn't, and that's a shame because it'd be cool if he was. At the moment, I feel like Gauss's main niche is just Redline gives outlandishly huge buffs to fire rate and attack speed and reload speed and stuff. which is good, but not like exciting, there are other ways to get those things. And again, it's a timer simulator. Whereas Gauss has all these interesting mechanics, but I don't think they matter that much. And so I hope this is a way to make battery management more interesting with kinetic plating. Thermal Sunder has some more expressiveness. You can build cold or heat or both or neither. And it's still useful even if you don't build any of them, because you can charge the battery with it and reduce armor and stuff. And then Mach Rush has this sort of flying into walls really quickly playstyle. And I also, from playing Gauss a lot, I read the wiki, and my understanding is that you should be charging your battery faster when you go faster, but it doesn't really feel that way to me. If that's not a thing, that should be a thing. It might be a thing, and I don't notice or something, but anyway. And then Mach Rush would also help you build battery. That I forgot to mention. That's kind of would be the payoff of that. But yeah, anyway, so those are my thoughts. I enjoyed this question. It's fun. A lot of people have mentioned that I sound like I have aspiring game designer vibes sometimes, and I do really like talking about game balance and game design. I feel like I, for better or for worse, am a person who's a little bit uninvested in like the specific gameplay experience I'm getting. I just want a gameplay experience that it's really dangerous to say like objectively good, that is objectively good, but like I just want a good gameplay experience. I'm not really attached to the one I'm having. Like it's fine if it's different as long as it is good in some way, like there's some appeal to it. And so I am no perfect game designer, no one is, but I do think that quality, kind of a kill your darlings quality of game design, I don't care about things being good. I don't really care about power fantasy for its own sake. I want some kind of fulfillment, I don't dislike power fantasy. I played Warframe for 4,000 hours. I clearly don't dislike power fantasy, but I want it to be, I don't know, just like crunchy. I don't want it to be free. I'm willing to put in some work for my fun. And good game designers must understand at all times that when the audience asks for something, they don't necessarily know what they want. They're asking for the thing their kid in a candy store are designing, which is not always bad, but it's not always good. You can't just give people directly what they want. You can get people to have more fun if you're willing to put them through some amount of work, some amount of thinking. You just have to know what is busy work and what is creative, stimulating, potentially interesting work. And of course, you need to keep in mind that that threshold will differ from person to person, but Warframe is great at that because there are so many different frames. Now we're just talking about game design. Sorry for answering not someone else's question, but my own, asking myself a question I want to be asked and then answering it in the middle of your question. Thank you very much for your support.